What we're going to be talking about is getting your indie game off the ground in 2014. We sort of added that date tag because it's quite important. 3 or 4 years ago, I think it was a very different scene. We've seen some fantastic successes more recently. And so we've assembled a power panel of some fantastic speakers here. If we just go along, and Charles, is your Brittany mic still working? Do you want to introduce yourself briefly? Yeah, you need very little introduction.
In the context of this, my company Revolution did a crowdfunding. We launched it 18 months ago, and it was successful. And we raised about $850,000 for a new Broken Sword game, and we shipped the game a month or so ago. So it's kind of been quite a journey.
Indeed. We'll look in. I'll let you unpack that experience a little bit more shortly. Mark, would you like to? I mean, again, that's someone else who needs no introduction.
Mark Rein from Epic Games. We make Unreal Engine technology that's being used by lots and lots and more every day of indie developers.
Moving along, James Cope is producer at Ruffian. Do you want to just speak a little about yourself?
We're Ruffian Games. We're probably best known for working on Crackdown. We're an independent studio, medium-sized company, and we're looking at ways of getting our own IP developed and funding for that. We're a largely work-for-hire studio.
And last but absolutely by no means least, Shahid Ahmad from Sony. A few words?
Hello, I'm actually Shahid Ahmad, but I'm much more widely known by my Twitter handle, so that's fine by me. I work in a team called Strategic Content at PlayStation. For the last couple of years, we've been helping lots of independent developers self-publish through all kinds of support mechanisms. It's been quite a ride.
So the first thing we want to talk a little bit about is the available routes to the market, and this is one of the things which I think has become increasingly exciting, certainly in the past 18 months. There is, of course, still the traditional publisher funding route. I mean, Charles, you've certainly had some experience with that, sort of in the slightly more distant past. How do you think that is as a route for indies these days?
The thing about publishers is that they take the risk. That shouldn't be underestimated because it's a very, very risky business. What we did is we felt we had the confidence with New Broken Sword game to go directly to our fan base. But if you don't have any fan base and you've got a great idea, then going through a publisher is a very legitimate way, and it's probably cheaper ultimately than trying to borrow the money from a venture capitalist. I'm not anti-publisher in the least, but it's it's a very good way to get off the ground.
And Mark, obviously, Epic's worked with publishers and releasing games in the past.
Yeah, I mean, we've had very good success with publishers, but it's very, very hard to negotiate with publishers if you don't have leverage. So if you've built nothing and you're just going in with a document explaining what it is you want to build these days, regardless of the fact they're willing to take risks, there's just some risks they're just not willing to take anymore. So I think that environment's gotten tougher, but I think it's still a viable avenue.
Yeah, and I think, with the industry certainly changing shape, and a lot of people talk about the kind of the AA segment of the market dropping out, I think it's fantastic. We've seen indie developers come in to really fill that void and inspire a lot of people with creativity and different types of gaming emotions, which is fantastic to see. But making those initial connections, as you say, with the people that have the money and used to be the ones to spend it, it's hard to have those introductions now, it seems. I mean, Jim, as you say, you have a thriving work-for-hire business. How do your conversations start? I mean, you've got a great track record. Obviously, that makes it easier.
I mean, it really is just a track record issue. I mean, it's we have some really good relationships with people like Microsoft, and we're working with Paradox at the moment. And it's just a conversation that we have around kind of developing ideas. I have to say, it's been good working with Microsoft for such a long time. We've got a really good working relationship with them, but it's been difficult over the last couple of years. I mean, one of the things that we want to try and do as a company is we want to bolster our kind of ownership of our own games and our own IP, and that's actually the thing that we found most challenging. So we have a really great technical skill set in the company, and we have a really solid work-for-hire business, but if and when that kind of goes patchy, as it often does, it's very hard to fall back on something that we own. And that's the kind of thing that we've been experimenting with. We've been, obviously, we work with you guys on Collective, which has been really interesting. And that was really as a testing the water of putting ideas out there. I mean, we're largely working on other IPs and things like that don't belong to us. And you know, I think that's Charles touched on it there. It's really hard to without the fan base, it's really hard to develop ideas both with publishers and with your and with the crowd, if you know, for want of a better term, because they're really adverse to new things. They want safe bets, and that's the way the industry has been for the last couple of years. So, you know, it's good. You know, it's a good solid business to have that work for hire background, but we struggle trying to find ways into stuff that we want to own.
Shahid, I think this sort of latest console generation has been striking in the work that you've been doing with Shuey and Adam, particularly in accessibilizing. I just made that up. Making more accessible the sort of traditionally harder to reach platforms. How do you think that's sort of changed the options for any developers to come to console? Whereas, you know, in the last generation, it wasn't impossible, but I think it was harder, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's always been this perception problem, particularly around PlayStation, that we're hard to access, that you don't know who to speak to, that there are all kinds of gates and so on to jump through. And to some extent, that's been true. And one of the reasons we were set up was to, I guess, help get rid of that perception. And part of the work that we do is done very publicly. But of course, the really hard job is done internally to change structures, processes, remove hurdles, and so on, to allow the organization to become a lot more permeable to what our partners want. And I think with PlayStation Vita, I'm not trying to sell the Vita here, but with PlayStation Vita, we were actually presented with a really cool opportunity. And the opportunity was, well, look, the traditional AAA space is not really engaging with Vita as much as we'd like. And the reason for that is obvious. The reason is it's not sold enough to make things work economically. And on the other hand, you've got a whole bunch of independent developers who are intensely creative, have great ideas, are creating games by the dozen for other platforms. Why they're not working with us? So we set about changing that. That was the first really big challenge. And we thought, you know, what could possibly go wrong? And nothing did. The great thing was we started to step out from behind our castle, as it were, and talk to people directly and make PlayStation a much more personable company. And that's really worked out. We've had something like 50, 60 independent developers published on PlayStation in the last year alone. It's going to be 100 plus this year. So it's really picking up. Very, very pleased with the way it's gone.
And you could, you know, say at a time when there are, I don't have the data to back this up to hand, but you know, it feels like there are fewer big titles launching and kind of hitting a certain size to be able to open up and allow these well, I say smaller, I don't mean that condescendingly, because you know, I think they're as important as the bigger adrenaline-based games. I mean, it makes sense just from a business perspective, right?
Yeah, I mean, let's not be too unkind to some of the independents. I mean, what they lack in terms of pure financial impact, they make up for in terms of volume. And also, I think that things are changing dramatically. I mean, that AA space that you were talking about, contracting massively. Well, there are larger independent developers who are going to occupy that space. And thanks to self-publishing, they no longer need large publishers to make that happen. Indeed. And thanks to their own creative impulses, the games that they're creating are ones that the public actually prefer. So it's been really vibrant. And the other thing, of course, that's affected matters somewhat is we have gone through a console transition. There are a lot of people who didn't think that any of the larger manufacturers would make the next transition. In fact, we've all come back stronger than ever, which is, I think, fantastic for the entire industry, fantastic for the ecosystem, and fantastic for gamers. So the other thing is also the work that we've done with Vita translated really seamlessly and very well with onto PS4. And you might argue that some of that was planned, but I don't think so. A lot of that was organic.
So it's a good segue, actually, when you're talking about the creative impulses, and you know, I thought it was exciting as a gamer, I suppose, to see Star Citizen kind of, you know, take in so much money, particularly when they kind of started out with the comments about, you know, well, none of the publishers thought there was a market for a big space game, and that opportunity wasn't there. Well, you know, it turns out the masses have sort of proved them wrong. This is probably the most exciting area, but possibly also the most challenging. I mean, Charles, you raised a good amount.
By the way, I think that was nonsense. The idea that, publishers weren't interested in these kinds of games, they may not have been interested in that project from that developer, but publishers are still investing in, especially platform holders, are still investing fairly large amounts of money in very ambitious projects. I mean, look at what CCP is doing here with Valkyrie, right? So, I mean, I think that's a great publicity angle, and my friend Brian Fargo uses that one a lot. Oh, we're able to take it to the men and kick the publishers around, but it's just not really realistic.
Yeah.
If you see what Sony's doing with their development program, what Microsoft is doing with ID at Xbox, I mean, those opportunities are out there to take those games and have, you know, big financial involvement. It's so I just don't like when people sell a story that isn't really accurate.
But I mean, a lot of people would argue that selling a story is what you have to do for crowdfunding. You've got to sell the vision, you've got to sell the perception, and you know, if a way to do that is to take a populist stance against you know, the evil element of the industry, says the Square Enix guy, then, you know, so be it, and it's worked out very well for them.
Yeah, but we shouldn't do it by eating each other, right?
I mean, in the end, the community, the gamers will decide, because it's up to them where they put their money. So yeah, I don't know. I don't take it too personally. I think that way lies disaster and ruin. But so Charles, that, you know, talk a little bit about your experiences.
Yeah, well, you touched on marketing then, and it's
that's vital, isn't it?
One of the things that I learnt a lot and enjoyed working with publishers was certainly on the marketing approach, and I would tend to kick off the marketing plan. And just to try and wrap up, because we haven't got very long, but in coming up with a campaign, the key thing is to have a video, because you've got to show as much as possible, because we're going to be asking for, you know, up to $5,000. And in our particular case, I was quite clear on what those marketing points were. I mean, I don't know how many people know Broken Sword, but our two characters, George and Nico, they're back. They're rendered in 2D with 2D backgrounds. There's the humor. There's, you know, the ambition, and all of those things, and the whole campaign was based around that. And what we found was that actually really quickly we had an incredibly passionate group of people who came to support and evangelize the whole project. And it became pretty clear, as I said earlier, that actually what really excited them was that they had an emotional attachment, they had an emotional involvement in something that they had a great passion for. And that kind of has driven the whole thing. And I would say that a lot of the examples couldn't have been published by publishers, and probably wouldn't have worked. But because these people have a direct emotional engagement with the developer, with the project, then their requirements are quite different to if they went and actually bought a finished product in a shop or on digitally from a publisher.
So I think the power of IP certainly comes through there. I mean, Jim, you kind of had the opposite experience. The power of IP sort of played against you when you were trying to sort of sell the concept of Game of Glens on Collective at the beginning.
So I mean, for people that aren't familiar, we were part of the Collective at its prototype phase, I suppose you could call it, kind of its initial launch, and we pitched a game called Game of Glens, which was a kind of 2D strategy, real-time tower defense kind of game that was very hard to describe, and that was another issue with it. But one of the problems that we faced was in terms of a popularity contest, which most kind of crowdfunding is really, we brought along a baggage of a really hardcore fan base for Crackdown, and we had a really significant backlash of people saying, you guys, you've been working on stuff for 3 years now, and we don't know what you're doing, and you're not making Crackdown. Like, excuse me, but what the fuck? That was the response, and we had a massive negative campaign against us, basically, and that was really difficult. It was, it was hurtful in some ways, but I totally understand why people feel like that. It's I feel the same. I'd love to make another Crackdown, but that's the way it is. And I think the strength of your reputation can work for you and against you in many ways, and that's a very difficult thing to counteract. It's really hard to overcome a negative reaction. Yeah. And I think with Charles and Broken Sword and everything, it's fantastic when you see kind of rebooted franchises that are doing very successful. But I think it's incredibly hard to launch new IP in that way because you're going to face lots of questions that are very difficult to answer.
Just finally, I want to end with Mark before maybe time for a question or two. You sort of announced a change in the business model for Unreal specifically. I mean, first of all, how has that been going? What's been the response to that?
Oh, it's been awesome. So we used to sell Unreal Engine for hundreds of thousands of dollars and decent royalty, and we would always provide source code, and we always wanted to provide source code to developers because we felt that was really important. And now with UE4, we were able to provide it to everybody for just a subscription price of $19 or 19 euros a month. So yeah, the uptake's been great. And talking about crowdfunding, we've just seen a lot of crowdfunding spring up even in the last couple days, where people are making really amazing looking stuff with Unreal Engine 4, and they're going out there, and I sympathize with them. I mean, I think crowdfunding is an awesome way to get build a community behind you, but it's with the new IP and new ideas, it's really, really tough. So we're also seeing we found publishers are really, really open to picking up some of these indie projects. So we have guys like here in the UK, we have Mike Gamble. In the US, we have Joe Kreiner, who have forged really good relationships with some of the mid-tier and larger publishers that are looking for things. So we try to help the developers wherever we can find the connection. But in terms of UE4, it's just been gangbusters.
And what sort of proportion of your business do you expect to reflect in that subscription model over time? How significant will it become for you?
Well, I mean, just in terms of numbers, there's more people today with access to Unreal Engine source code than ever had access to Unreal Engine source code in all 3 prior versions. And I mean, we're 45 days in. So it's going to be, I can't even predict where the ceiling is, right? It's just, it's going to be quite large.
Awesome. Okay, well, have we got time for a couple of questions? Yeah, okay. So we've got some great people here with a great variety of experience. I'd really urge you to take advantage of that. So are there any questions for anybody? Yeah.
Yes, we've got a few students in today, probably directed to you as well, Mark. Obviously, people always say it's always good to start off with a game. How would you go about, say, fresh out university as a programmer and creating your own engine, for example? Because sometimes it's better to equip tools to people to use rather than just design from the outspec. Say, if you're a programmer and you lack that design cutting edge, but you still want to create, how would you go about that?
I'd like to answer that. My advice for people getting into the industry is that it's never been easier to make games. Don't waste your time making engines. Use Unreal. Use Unity. Sorry, Mark. Yeah. I'm going to take the opportunity to suck up to Mark and Shahid here. What they've done is absolutely fantastic for the industry over the years. And honestly, just go away, make a game. Don't waste your time trying to make technology. The technology's out there. Just do it. That's it. That's the advice.
Yeah, one of the things we're really excited about with schools, and a few days before we launched our subscription, I had a chat with the head of computer game development courses at NC State University, and I told him, I said, well, here's what we're going to do. We've known him a long time. I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to release the source code with the subscription, and the full source code, everything. And everybody's going to be able to get it. It's going to be on GitHub, and people are going to be able to contribute to it as well. And so far, we've got a ton of code review, and several community changes and updates have made it into the engine. And I said, and he like stopped me. He goes, wait, you mean we're going to be able to teach our programmers? We're going to have our programmers just get a copy of your engine through the subscription and be able to look at it and then add more stuff to it and make changes and do things? Yep. You mean we're going to be able to get our computer science guys to look at your tools and then dissect and see how they work? And yep. You mean, and he's like going on and on and on, and the guy's practically crying on the phone at the end. And he's like, so, I mean, if you want to, I say this, but if you want to create your own engine, best way to start looking at, engines that are out there and how they do things. And then, with Unreal, you can even look at the code. Don't borrow any of it, but you're welcome to look at the way we do things. You're welcome to take Unreal and modify it to be your engine per se, and then contribute back to the community. And you'll see there's already over, I think when I left, there were like 3,500 forks of Unreal Engine code, which is pretty incredible because one of the guys told me there's 5,000 forks of Linux, right? So I mean, and that's 45 days, we're at 3,500 forks. And so people are just doing all kinds of crazy stuff with it. And I think it creates a great learning opportunity, not just in games, but in the kind of stuff Doug was talking about earlier, where, just because you have skills in making games doesn't mean you have to start by making games. I think starting making a game is really tough. But if you start doing something and you have a portfolio and you can show people, I made this app, or I made this this little graphical thing, or this snippet, or this piece of code, I think that could eventually work your way into games. Or you could, or like Doug was saying, you could use that to make the kind of money it then takes to fund your own games. And trust me, when you have the money to fund your own games and you can create the game that's really in your heart instead of someone else's idea, including crowdfunding, you're going to make the best game you can make, and your chance for commercial success is so much higher.
The other thing I'd say from the student perspective is also get involved with, Yuki has a great student organization. I was very honored to be a mentor for a team recently in a game jam. I went down to Norwich and sat with the team, and it was a great experience. I think they learned a lot, and I think the importance of networking, building a track record, finding out actually what it's like to try and put something together in a short period of time. Learning by that kind of experience is a really fantastic way to get a sense of what it takes.
I've got another idea.
Oh, well, that's a terrible shame.
Let me finish.
Because I've just had the...
No, this is really important.
Go
you
on,
should
man.
tune into our Twitch stream tomorrow afternoon.
Mark's in sales, by the way. I don't know if you know.
No. There's nothing to do with money.
Brilliant. Well, thanks ever so much to the panel, Charles, to Mark, to Jim, and to Shahid. If you want to ask any other questions, please make use of this time today and tomorrow to just come up to these people. If you want to come and say hi, we'll be more than happy to talk to you. Thank you very much.